Doctor's Goosebumps. The baby's first words shattered everything. In this gripping story, we witness a doctor's journey of guilt, fear, and redemption. After a devastating mistake 20 years ago, Dr. Michael Roberts is forced to face the truth and the haunting consequences of his actions. Will he find peace, or will his past continue to torment him? Watch the story unfold. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Stories TH for more emotional and thought-provoking content. The following story unfolds in the sterile and high-pressure environment of a New York hospital, focusing on the unsettling events surrounding a newborn baby's strange behavior and the deep-rooted guilt of a doctor whose past mistakes resurface in the most terrifying way. Dr. Michael Roberts, a renowned surgeon, was working in the delivery room, carefully monitoring the condition of Eleanor Foster, a young woman in the throes of labor. The atmosphere was tense as the beeping of the heart rate monitor reverberated through the room. Eleanor's breathing was rapid, her face pale from the excruciating pain, and her hands were clenched around the bed rails as if holding on to the last remnants of her strength. Beside her, the midwife, Beatrice Lewis, gently reassured Eleanor, urging her to push harder. But Eleanor's body had reached its limit. She shook her head, unable to summon the strength to push any further. The baby's heart rate was dropping, and Dr. Roberts quickly made the decision to use forceps, aware that time was running out. Just as he was preparing for the procedure, a strange chill swept through the room. It was a high-end private hospital, and the air conditioning was always carefully controlled, but this sudden drop in temperature was eerie and unsettling. With great effort, Dr. Roberts delivered the baby, but to his horror, the room fell silent. No cry, no sound whatsoever. The tension in the air grew thick as Beatrice, her face ashen, watched in disbelief. It felt like time had frozen. The baby, covered in blood and amniotic fluid, remained completely still in Dr. Roberts' hands. As he looked down at the newborn, he was struck by its eyes. They were not the wide, innocent eyes of a newborn, but instead, eyes that seemed far too sharp, far too knowing, as though they belonged to someone who had lived a full life, not a helpless infant. Before Dr. Roberts could react, the baby did something even more chilling. It spoke in a deep, grave voice. "You kill me once. This time, you won't escape." The words sent a wave of terror through the room. Claire Bennett, a young nurse who had been working at the hospital for less than a year, screamed and dropped a tray of surgical instruments, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Dr. Roberts froze, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind raced. No, it was impossible. The baby could not have spoken, but the smirk on its lips told him otherwise. It was mocking him. Eleanor, still disoriented from the childbirth, weakly asked, "What's happening? Is my baby okay?" But no one answered. Beatrice cautiously stepped toward Dr. Roberts and gently took the baby from his trembling hands, trying to maintain her composure. She whispered, "Maybe we misheard," but even her words lacked conviction. The baby's eerie gaze never wavered. The nurses were terrified. A question hung in the air. Was this some sort of twisted illusion or something far more sinister? Soon after, the rumors began to spread throughout the hospital. The baby's strange behavior was impossible to ignore. Matthew, as the baby was named, didn't cry like normal newborns, and instead, he lay in his crib, staring wide-eyed at everyone, as though he understood everything happening around him. The nurses spoke in hushed whispers. "Did you see his eyes? I swear it looked at me like it knew I was afraid." The unsettling presence of the baby grew stronger with each passing day. Nurses began to notice inexplicable chills in the neonatal care unit, and strange whispers seemed to echo in the corridors at night. Something was wrong with this child, something that no one could explain. Maria Owens, a diligent nurse at the hospital, couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously amiss. She had seen strange occurrences around Matthew since his birth. The whispers grew louder, and she began noticing the inexplicable chill whenever she entered his room. One day, while speaking with Beatrice, Maria discovered that some of the nurses had heard a voice in Matthew's room, a voice that didn't belong to a newborn. Beatrice, shaken by Maria's account, confirmed that something wasn't right. The baby never cried, never made a sound, and yet his eyes were always wide open. March 14th was the same as the date a tragic event had occurred 20 years ago. Maria unearthed an old medical record from that time, detailing the death of a baby named Sophia, watching everyone with an unnerving awareness. It was then that Maria uncovered something far more disturbing: Matthew's birth date grant. The cause of death was listed as asphyxiation at birth, and the attending physician was none other than Dr. Michael Roberts. The records had been altered, but the signature was smudged, a clear indication of tampering. It was then that Maria realized that Dr. Roberts might have been involved in the cover-up of the baby's death all those years ago. Determined to uncover the truth, Maria confronted Dr. Roberts, who initially dismissed her questions. But when Maria pressed him about the tampered records and the eerie coincidence of Matthew's birth date matching the date of the other baby's death, Dr. Roberts' composure faltered. His face turned pale, and he seemed to shrink under the weight of Maria's accusations. For the first time, it seemed that Dr. Roberts wasn't just hiding something, he was terrified. As the investigation into the past continued, the strange occurrences around Matthew only intensified. Nurses who had once been brave began to quit, unable to handle the terror that seemed to follow the child. Ray Sanders, a nurse who had worked the night shift, swore he saw Matthew's crib shake on its own, with no one near it. Another nurse, Lucy Parker, reported hearing a strange voice during her night shift, a voice that seemed to come from nowhere, sending shivers down her spine. Meanwhile, Dr. Roberts began to suffer from sleepless nights, haunted by the image of Matthew's eyes. His life became a nightmare, filled with visions of the child's gaze and the whisper of the words, "You killed me." Desperate to escape the psychological torment, he turned to alcohol and sedatives, but nothing worked. Every time he closed his eyes, the memories of the child he had killed so many years ago resurfaced, and Matthew's haunting presence followed him wherever he went. One night, Dr. Roberts finally decided to confront his past. He entered the neonatal unit, determined to face the child and his own guilt. As he stood in the dark room, staring at Matthew's crib, he whispered, "I know you're here." The baby, still wide-eyed, didn't react, but the air in the room turned cold. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The curtains fluttered wildly, and the lights flickered as an eerie voice, one not belonging to Matthew, whispered, "You killed me." The truth that Dr. Roberts had buried for years finally surfaced. The following day, Dr. Roberts confessed everything. He admitted to making a fatal mistake during the delivery of the other baby, Sophia Grant, 20 years ago. Terrified of losing his career, he had covered up the death, and the soul of that child had never moved on. Matthew's birth was the culmination of this guilt, a manifestation of the consequences of his actions. The hospital, shocked by the confession, began to unravel the web of lies that had been spun for years. Dr. Roberts faced his punishment, both legal and spiritual. He was tried for his crimes and sentenced to prison. But the burden of guilt was something he would carry for the rest of his life. However, as the years passed, he tried to make amends, using his medical knowledge to help inmates in prison. He even wrote a memoir, detailing his mistakes and the haunting that followed, which became a significant work in medical ethics. As for Eleanor and Matthew, they moved on with their lives. Eleanor raised Matthew in peace, far away from the haunting memories of his birth. Matthew grew up healthy and happy, unaware of the dark events that had surrounded his arrival. Though Michael's actions had caused pain, the truth had been revealed, and the cycle of suffering had finally come to an end. The lesson of the story is clear. The consequences of our actions are inescapable, and the truth, though painful, is necessary for redemption. Michael had to face his past, and in doing so, he found a sliver of peace. This story is a poignant reminder that our mistakes have far-reaching consequences. In the end, the only path to redemption is facing the truth, no matter how terrifying it may be. For Michael, his soul could only find peace after admitting his guilt and accepting responsibility. Through his journey, we see the importance of taking responsibility for our actions and the power of redemption. It is a lesson in medical ethics, in personal responsibility, and in the haunting effects of guilt. The story begins with a highly intense and unsettling scene in a New York hospital's delivery room. Dr. Michael Roberts, an experienced surgeon, is intensely monitoring the condition of his patient, Eleanor Foster, who is in the final stages of labor. Eleanor is in excruciating pain, struggling to push as her strength diminishes. Despite the efforts of the midwife, Beatrice Lewis, who tries to reassure her to push harder, Eleanor's exhaustion becomes evident. The baby's heart rate is rapidly decreasing, causing alarm in the operating room. The tension in the room grows palpable as Dr. Roberts makes a split-second decision to use forceps to assist in delivering the baby. However, just as he prepares to act, a chilling cold draft sweeps through the room, creating an eerie atmosphere. This is a high-end private hospital, and such drafts are uncommon, especially with the sealed delivery room doors and perfectly controlled air conditioning. The room, which had been filled with the normal sounds of medical procedures, now falls eerily silent. The baby is finally delivered, but the moment is far from the joyful occasion it should be. No cry emerges from the newborn, and the room becomes frozen in uncertainty. For several seconds, the room remains in a terrible stillness. The newborn, covered in blood and amniotic fluid, lies motionless in Dr. Roberts' hands. At first, there is no sign of life, and the tension among the medical staff is thick, with everyone waiting for the inevitable sound of the baby's first cry. Beatrice, her face drained of color, watches in silence, as if anticipating something deeply disturbing. But the baby does not cry. Instead, it opens its eyes far too sharp and deep for a newborn. These were eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of an adult rather than a helpless infant. As Dr. Roberts holds the baby, his breath catches in his throat, and a cold shiver runs down his spine. The baby's gaze locks onto his, seemingly peering deep into his soul, making him feel as though he were being judged. Then, in a deep and unsettling voice, the baby speaks. "You killed me once, this time you won't escape." The chilling words cause a gasp among the nurses, particularly Claire Bennett, a young nurse who is only a year into her career. She drops a tray of surgical instruments, and the sound of the metal crashing onto the floor reverberates through the room. Dr. Roberts, his hands shaking and his entire body drenched in cold sweat, stands frozen in place, unable to fully comprehend what just happened. His mind screams that it is impossible, but the baby's smirk and unwavering gaze suggest otherwise. The room is gripped with fear, and the air feels heavier, almost suffocating. As Eleanor, still disoriented from childbirth, weakly asks what is happening, no one dares to respond. Beatrice, though visibly shaken, tries to regain composure and carefully takes the baby from Dr. Roberts' arms. She whispers softly, almost as if trying to convince herself, "Maybe we misheard." But there is no mistaking the eerie atmosphere, and the baby's silent stare seems to confirm the fear that everyone in the room is feeling. From that moment on, the whispers about Matthew, the newborn, begin to spread throughout the hospital. The staff becomes increasingly fearful as strange occurrences begin to happen around the baby. Nurses report feeling inexplicable chills when entering the neonatal care unit, and one nurse, Isabel Martin, swears that she heard a voice whispering inside the room, something that didn't sound human. The baby, Matthew, never cries like normal babies do. He remains eerily still, always watching everyone around him with those unnaturally sharp eyes. Soon, more unsettling events unfold. Ray Sanders, another nurse, reports seeing a shadow of a small child running down the hallway late at night, only for the shadow to vanish when he approached it. Other strange sightings and unexplainable occurrences further intensify the growing sense of dread surrounding Matthew. Dr. Michael Roberts, the doctor who had delivered Matthew, becomes tormented by guilt and fear. Ever since Matthew's birth, he has been unable to sleep, plagued by nightmares of the baby's deep eyes and the words it spoke. His insomnia worsens, and he becomes increasingly paranoid, hearing whispers and feeling as though he is being watched. He begins to see Matthew's image in mirrors, as though the baby's soul is haunting him. Michael's once confident demeanor is shattered, and he becomes a shadow of his former self, slowly descending into madness. Despite his obvious distress, Michael refuses to acknowledge the connection between Matthew's eerie behavior and the guilt that has followed him for years. When confronted by Maria Owens, a nurse at the hospital, who has begun to suspect something sinister about Matthew's birth and his connection to a past event, Dr. Roberts becomes defensive. Maria uncovers an old medical record that links the death of a baby named Sophia Grant 20 years ago to Drive Roberts. The death had been marked as natural, but Maria discovers that the records had been falsified and that Dr. Roberts was involved in the cover-up. The birth date of Sophia's child coincidentally matches Matthew's birth date, suggesting that Matthew is somehow linked to the death of Sophia's baby. Maria, determined to uncover the truth, confronts Dr. Roberts with her findings. As she presents the altered records and questions him about his involvement, Michael begins to unravel. His attempts to suppress the memories of his past mistake are no longer effective. His guilt and fear are too great to ignore. Slowly, the pieces of the puzzle begin to fall into place, and Dr. Roberts is forced to confront the horrors of his past. Michael finally confesses that 20 years ago, he made a grave mistake during the delivery of Sophia Grant's baby. The child was born with asphyxia, and Michael tried to save it but miscalculated. In a moment of panic, he smothered the baby to hide his mistake, fearing the consequences for his career. The child's death was covered up, and the records were altered to protect Michael. The guilt, however, never left him, and he would live with it for the rest of his life. The confession sends shockwaves through the hospital, but it is also the beginning of Dr. Roberts' redemption. Despite his years of denying the truth, he has finally faced his past. Yet, the chilling presence of Matthew remains, and it becomes clear that Matthew, though a baby, is not an ordinary child. He has come to ensure that justice is served and the wrongs of the past are corrected. After Michael's confession, he begins to atone for his sins. He resigns from his position at the hospital and faces legal consequences for his actions. He is sentenced to prison for his role in covering up the infant's death, and his story becomes a cautionary tale for the medical community. Michael spends the remainder of his time helping inmates in prison with their medical needs, using his knowledge to assist others who have been ignored by the system. He also writes a memoir, recounting his mistakes, guilt, and the haunting that followed him for years. Meanwhile, Eleanor and Matthew move away from New York to start a new life in a peaceful town near Monterey, California. Matthew grows up healthy, free from the eerie presence that once surrounded him. He is a normal child, loved by his mother, and unaware of the horrors of his birth. Eleanor dedicates her life to helping pregnant women in need, using her experiences to make a difference in the world. Years later, Maria returns to visit Michael in prison, where she finds him a broken man, far removed from the proud doctor he once was. Michael expresses his regret for his actions, but he has also found a sense of peace in knowing that he has faced his past. In a final act of redemption, he thanks Maria for helping him find the courage to confess. As time passes, the storm of guilt and terror that once consumed Michael finally fades. The hospital moves on, and Matthew grows into a bright, carefree young boy, free from the supernatural events that once haunted him. But the lesson of responsibility, guilt, and redemption remains, and Michael's story serves as a painful reminder of the consequences of our actions and the importance of facing the truth. In the end, forgiveness is not about forgetting, but about allowing those who have wronged to atone and find peace. Michael, having faced his past, was finally able to find a sense of peace, and Matthew, the child who was once a symbol of guilt, grew up as a living reminder of redemption. The cycle of suffering had ended, and in its place, a new chapter of healing and peace began. The story unfolds in a medical environment filled with tension, confusion, and fear. Dr. Michael Roberts, a seasoned and respected physician, finds himself in the midst of a high-stakes delivery in the bustling operating room of a prestigious hospital in New York. The young mother-to-be, Eleanor Foster, is struggling to give birth. Exhausted and on the brink of collapse, Eleanor's strength wanes as she attempts to push. The surgical team, led by Dr. Roberts, is doing everything they can to help, but things aren't going as planned. The baby's heart rate is dropping rapidly, and the room is filled with the beeping sounds of the heart rate monitor that seem to echo the urgency in the air. As Eleanor struggles, the midwife, Beatrice Lewis, tries to comfort her, encouraging her to push harder. But Eleanor, overwhelmed by the pain and fatigue, can only shake her head, her voice cracking in defeat. "I can't. I have no strength left," she whispers, giving into exhaustion. Dr. Roberts, his brow furrowed with worry, glances at the monitor and orders his colleague, Andrew Harris, to prepare the forceps. There's no time to waste. The baby must be delivered immediately. In the midst of the chaos, something strange happens. A cold draft sweeps through the room, sending a chill through the air despite the perfectly controlled temperature of the high-end private hospital. The operating room doors are always sealed, and the air conditioning system keeps the temperature stable, but the sudden chill creates a disquieting atmosphere that leaves the medical team uneasy. The delivery finally takes place, but it's not the joyful moment it should have been. The baby is born, but there is no cry. The room plunges into a tense silence. Beatrice's face pales as she looks at the lifeless body of the baby, still covered in blood and amniotic fluid. The nurses freeze, unsure of what to do. For several seconds, no one moves, and the silence hangs heavy in the room. Time seems to stand still as they all wait for the baby to cry, for that first sound that signals life. But the baby does not cry. Instead, the baby opens its eyes. These are not the eyes of a newborn, innocent and soft. No, these eyes are sharp and deep, as if they hold the soul of an adult. The gaze is intense and unsettling, locking onto Dr. Roberts with a piercing stare that seems to cut through him. The baby's eyes hold a chilling understanding, as if it has lived a life far beyond the womb. Then, in a voice that seems too deep and grave for an infant, the baby speaks. "You killed me once. This time you won't escape." The words hang in the air like a nightmare come to life. A blood-curdling scream shatters the silence. Claire Bennett, a young nurse who is still relatively new to the profession, shrieks in terror and drops a tray of surgical instruments, the sound of metal crashing to the floor echoing through the already tense room. Dr. Roberts, standing frozen with the baby still in his hands, trembles violently. He whispers to himself, "No, impossible. I must have misheard." But the baby continues to stare at him, its lips curling into a knowing smirk as if mocking the horror in his eyes. Eleanor, still groggy and disoriented from childbirth, weakly opens her eyes and asks, "What's happening? Is my baby okay?" But no one answers. Beatrice, clearly shaken, steps forward cautiously, her hands trembling as she carefully takes the baby from Dr. Roberts. She whispers softly, trying to reassure herself, "Maybe we misheard." But there is no denying the unsettling atmosphere in the room, and the baby's unnaturally deep stare seems to confirm the dread that everyone feels. As the situation spirals further, the atmosphere at the hospital becomes increasingly heavy. Strange rumors start to spread among the staff. Nurses whisper about the baby's eerie eyes, about the chilling silence that filled the room after its birth. The whispers grow louder as more odd occurrences take place. Some nurses report feeling a cold draft in the neonatal unit whenever they enter the room, while others hear strange voices that seem to come from nowhere. One nurse, Isabel Martin, swears that she heard a voice whispering in her ear while she was in the nursery, and another nurse, Ray Sanders, insists that he saw the shadow of a small child running down the hallway one night, but when he chased after it, the shadow vanished. The dread surrounding Matthew Foster, the newborn who did not cry, grows in the hospital. It is clear that something is wrong, but no one can quite explain it. Dr. Roberts, the very doctor who delivered Matthew, begins to experience his own terrifying symptoms. He is plagued by nightmares in which he sees the baby's eyes and hears its voice, whispering that it had been killed once before and would never let him escape. He starts to feel as if someone is watching him constantly, and he even begins to see Matthew's face reflected in mirrors, though no one is there. His insomnia worsens, and his mental state deteriorates. In the midst of these strange occurrences, Maria Owens, a nurse at the hospital, begins to investigate. She is one of the few who refuses to be intimidated by the whispers and rumors. When she uncovers a file from 20 years ago, she discovers an old case involving an infant who died during childbirth, a case that had been marked as a natural death. However, Maria finds that the records have been falsified, and she soon connects the dots between this case and Matthew's birth date. The clues suggest that Matthew may be connected to a past mistake made by Dr. Roberts during a delivery 2 decades ago. Maria confronts Dr. Roberts about her findings. At first, he denies everything, but as she presses him, the truth begins to unravel. Michael finally admits that 20 years ago, he had made a fatal mistake during the delivery of a baby named Sophia Grant. The child had been born with asphyxia, and Dr. Roberts had tried to save it, but miscalculated. In a panic, he smothered the baby to hide his mistake, and the hospital covered up the truth, declaring the child's death a natural one. The guilt from this act haunted Dr. Roberts for years, and now he believes that Matthew, the newborn, has returned to seek revenge. Dr. Roberts' confession shakes the hospital to its core, and the weight of his past actions becomes undeniable. He resigns from his position, fully aware that his career is over. But more than that, he begins to atone for his sins. He spends his remaining time in prison, helping fellow inmates and writing a memoir to share the truth about what he did. Meanwhile, Matthew grows up healthy and free from the supernatural forces that once surrounded him. His mother, Eleanor, raises him in a quiet town where they can live a peaceful life away from the horrors of the past. As Michael's story comes to light, the hospital and the public are forced to confront the ethical failings of the medical profession. Michael is sentenced to prison for his role in the cover-up, and his story becomes a cautionary tale for future doctors. But for Michael, it is not the punishment that matters most. It is the knowledge that he has finally faced his past and is now free of the guilt that once consumed him. As time passes, Michael reflects on his mistakes and the journey toward redemption. His story is a painful but necessary reminder of the consequences of one's actions and the importance of facing the truth. It is not about forgetting the past, but rather about allowing those who have wronged to atone and find peace. For Michael, the path to redemption is long and difficult, but it is also a journey that brings him the peace he had been seeking for years. In the end, the story emphasizes the importance of responsibility, accountability, and the consequences of our actions. While the supernatural elements surrounding Matthew may have added an eerie twist, the heart of the story lies in the exploration of guilt, redemption, and the truth. The human conscience cannot be silenced forever, and the journey toward redemption is one that must be faced head-on, no matter how painful it may be. The power of truth, no matter how painful, is the key to finding peace. And for Michael, that peace was finally within reach. The story begins in a New York hospital, where Dr. Michael Roberts, a well-respected doctor, is overseeing a high-risk delivery. Eleanor Foster, a young woman in labor, is struggling to give birth. The operating room is filled with tension as Eleanor's heart rate fluctuates and the baby's heart rate drops dangerously low. Dr. Roberts and his team are running out of time, and the situation becomes increasingly dire. As Eleanor fights to hold on to her strength, the room grows heavy with anxiety, the sound of the heart rate monitor echoing through the sterile atmosphere. Despite the midwife Beatrice's encouragement for Eleanor to push harder, Eleanor can't find the strength to do so. Her face is pale, and her body is drenched in sweat from exhaustion. With each passing second, the situation seems to worsen, and Dr. Roberts, ever the professional, orders his colleague Andrew Harris to prepare the forceps. They have no time to lose, and the pressure is mounting. Then, as the baby is finally delivered, something horrifying happens. The room plunges into complete silence. No cry is heard from the baby, a silence that is far too long for any newborn. The baby, covered in blood and amniotic fluid, is motionless in Dr. Roberts' hands. Beatrice, the midwife, stares in disbelief, and the nurses freeze in place. For several seconds, no one knows what to do, and the oppressive silence fills the room with unease. Suddenly, the baby opens its eyes. These eyes are not like the eyes of any typical newborn. They are too sharp, too deep, almost as if the baby has lived a lifetime before being born. Dr. Roberts feels his breath catch as the baby stares at him with a gaze that seems to pierce into his very soul. And then, in a voice that is far too deep and grave for an infant, the baby speaks. "You kill me once. This time, you won't escape." The words hang in the air like a dark omen. Claire Bennett, a young nurse, shrieks in terror, dropping the tray of surgical instruments she's holding. The clatter of metal crashes to the floor, further amplifying the tense atmosphere. Dr. Roberts stands frozen, cold sweat soaking his body, his hands trembling as he continues to hold the baby. His mind races, trying to comprehend what he just heard. The baby's words seem impossible, but the smirk on its tiny face makes him feel a terrifying sense of recognition. Eleanor, still dazed and weak from childbirth, weakly opens her eyes and asks, "What's happening? Is my baby okay?" No one answers her. Beatrice, equally terrified, steps forward to take the baby from Dr. Roberts' hands. She whispers, trying to convince herself, maybe we misheard. But even as she holds the baby, she can feel the weight of the room's unsettling presence. As Beatrice wraps the baby in a cloth and places it in the crib, an eerie stillness fills the room. The baby does not cry, which is highly unusual. Every newborn should let out their first cry, a sound that signifies life. But Matthew, the newborn, remains silent, lying there with wide-open eyes, staring at the adults around him. His gaze seems to communicate a deep understanding of everything happening in the room. The nurses and doctors can feel the chill in the air, and there's a sense that something is deeply wrong. The atmosphere in the hospital becomes progressively more oppressive as whispers of the strange child, Matthew, begin to spread among the staff. It doesn't take long for rumors to surface. Some nurses report feeling an inexplicable chill when entering the neonatal care unit, and others claim they hear whispers in the room. Some nurses, like Isabel Martin, report hearing a voice in the nursery, a voice that seemed to come from nowhere. Meanwhile, Ray Sanders, another nurse, swears that he saw the shadow of a child running down the hallway, only for it to disappear as soon as he reached the corner. The strange occurrences surrounding Matthew continue to multiply. The baby's eyes are described as unnaturally deep, and some even say they can see an unsettling knowledge in his gaze, one that a newborn shouldn't possess. As the whispers grow louder, Dr. Roberts becomes more agitated and starts to lose his composure. He begins suffering from severe insomnia, plagued by nightmares of the baby and his deep, haunting eyes. He sees the baby in his dreams, staring at him from the operating table, its eyes filled with an emotion that no newborn should have. Meanwhile, the unsettling presence around the hospital intensifies. The strange occurrences are not limited to the neonatal unit. Dr. Roberts sees Matthew's face reflected in mirrors, even though the baby isn't physically present. He hears whispers of the child's voice, always taunting him with the words, "You killed me once." The more Dr. Roberts tries to deny the reality of what is happening, the more the occurrences intensify, trapping him in a cycle of fear and guilt. Dr. Michael Roberts' guilt becomes overwhelming as the haunting experiences escalate. He knows that something is wrong, and he begins to suspect that Matthew may be the embodiment of his past mistake. As he faces the terrifying consequences of his actions, his mental state deteriorates. He decides to confront his past, and that's when he remembers a case from 20 years ago. It was a delivery that went terribly wrong, a child named Sophia Grant who died during childbirth. He had made a fatal mistake during the delivery, and the hospital had covered up the truth. But now, Matthew's birth seems to be tied to that moment, as if the soul of the child who died years ago has returned to seek justice. Maria Owens, a determined nurse, uncovers the truth about what happened 2 decades ago. She discovers that the hospital records of Sophia Grant's birth have been falsified. The child's death had been marked as a natural complication, but Maria finds a small irregularity in the signature section of the records. Dr. Roberts had been involved in the delivery, and the more Maria investigates, the more she begins to suspect that the strange events surrounding Matthew's birth are connected to the tragedy from years ago. Maria confronts Dr. Roberts, and he is forced to admit that he had made a mistake during the delivery. The baby had been born with asphyxia, and Dr. Roberts, in a moment of panic, had smothered the child to cover up his error. The hospital had falsified the records to protect Dr. Roberts' reputation. But now, 2 decades later, Matthew, the child born to Eleanor, has come to seek revenge. Dr. Roberts is forced to confront his past mistakes and the terrible price he has paid for his actions. His confession shakes the hospital to its core, and the truth about his past is revealed to the world. Dr. Roberts resigns from his position, and he spends the remaining years of his life in prison, helping fellow inmates and writing a memoir about his guilt and redemption. Meanwhile, Matthew grows up healthy and free from the supernatural forces that once haunted him. Eleanor, Matthew's mother, finds peace in raising her son far away from the horrors of the past. She moves to a quiet town in California, where she dedicates her life to helping other pregnant women in need. As for Dr. Roberts, he spends his final years atoning for his past mistakes. He learns to face the truth, and while he may never find forgiveness, he finds peace in knowing that he has taken responsibility for his actions. The story ends with a powerful message about responsibility, guilt, and redemption. Dr. Roberts' journey from guilt to atonement highlights the importance of taking responsibility for our actions, no matter how difficult it may be. It is a reminder that the truth, however painful, must be confronted in order to find peace and redemption. The consequences of our mistakes may haunt us, but it is never too late to face them and make things right. The story begins in the high-stakes environment of a New York hospital, where Dr. Michael Roberts, a highly regarded surgeon, is overseeing a delicate and complicated delivery. The room is filled with tension as Eleanor Foster, a young and exhausted woman in labor, struggles to hold on to her strength. Her face is pale, her breath shallow, and her hands clutch the sides of the bed as if trying to gather every last ounce of energy. The sound of the beeping heart rate monitor fills the room, growing more frantic as the baby's heart rate begins to drop. Dr. Roberts glances anxiously at the monitor, the alarming readings signaling that time is running out. Beside him, the midwife, Beatrice Lewis, tries to reassure Eleanor with gentle words, urging her to push just a little more. "Breathe deeply, Eleanor," Beatrice says, but the young mother shakes her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I can't," she whispers, her voice breaking from exhaustion. With no more time to waste, Dr. Roberts orders his colleague Andrew Harris to prepare the forceps. The room is tense, the situation growing more dire by the second. As Dr. Roberts maneuvers the forceps to assist with the delivery, something unexpected happens. The room, which had been sterile and clinical, suddenly grows unnervingly cold. This high-end private hospital in New York is known for its perfectly controlled climate, yet a cold draft fills the room, making Beatrice shudder. The surgical lights cast harsh shadows, and the room becomes still as everyone braces for what happens next. After what feels like an eternity, the baby is finally delivered, but to everyone's shock, no cry is heard. A moment of eerie silence fills the room, heightening the tension. Beatrice, staring in disbelief, watches as the tiny newborn, still covered in blood and amniotic fluid, is placed in Dr. Roberts' hands. Her face turns pale as she realizes that the baby is not crying, something that every newborn does to signify life. The nurses stand frozen, their eyes wide with horror. For a few seconds, it feels as if time itself has stopped. But then, the unthinkable happens. The baby opens its eyes. The eyes are not those of a normal newborn. They are deep, unsettling, almost as if they hold the wisdom of an adult. Dr. Roberts feels a chill run down his spine as he locks eyes with the baby, a gaze that pierces through him. Then, in a voice that is far too grave and mature for an infant, the baby speaks. "You kill me once. This time, you won't escape." A blood-curdling scream from Claire Bennett, a young nurse, shatters the silence. She drops the tray of surgical instruments she's holding, the sound of metal crashing to the floor echoing through the room. Dr. Roberts stands frozen, his body drenched in sweat, his hands trembling as he holds the baby. The room is still, and a feeling of dread fills the air. He mutters to himself, "Impossible." But the baby continues to stare at him, its lips curling into a knowing smirk, as if mocking the fear that is now consuming him. Eleanor, still disoriented from the delivery, weakly asks, "What's happening? Is my baby okay?" The room falls into an uncomfortable silence, no one daring to answer her. Beatrice steps forward, swallowing hard, and takes the baby from Dr. Roberts' arms, her voice barely a whisper. Maybe we misheard. But even she cannot hide her fear as she wraps the baby in a cloth and places it in the crib. What happens next only deepens the unease in the room. The baby, now in the crib, remains eerily still. There is no crying, no movement, nothing that signals life. The nurses and doctors stand around, holding their breath, each one aware that something is horribly wrong. The baby's wide-open eyes remain fixed on them, watching every movement with an unsettling calm. It feels as if the baby has been here before, as if it understands everything happening around it. Outside the room, the whispers begin. Nurses who have been waiting for news of the delivery exchange anxious glances. An elderly doctor, Samuel Nelson, steps into the room and immediately senses that something is off. He quietly observes the baby in the crib and turns to Dr. Roberts with a concerned look. "Something is very wrong with this child," Samuel whispers, but Dr. Roberts dismisses it, refusing to acknowledge the growing sense of dread. However, the strange events do not stop there. Over the following days, the unsettling presence of the baby seems to spread throughout the hospital. Nurses report feeling a cold draft when they enter the neonatal unit. Some say they hear strange whispers in the room, and others claim they feel as though they are being watched. One nurse, Isabel Martin, even insists that she heard a voice, a deep, raspy whisper, coming from the crib, though there was no one around. As these odd occurrences continue, Dr. Roberts is increasingly plagued by sleepless nights, filled with haunting nightmares of the baby. In these dreams, he sees the baby's piercing eyes and hears the chilling words, "You killed me." During the day, he feels the baby's gaze following him, even when the child is nowhere near him. Dr. Roberts begins to lose his grip on reality, and the once confident, composed doctor is now a shell of his former self, tormented by the guilt of his past. Maria Owens, a nurse who has been working at the hospital, begins to suspect that something is not right. She starts to investigate the strange occurrences surrounding Matthew and uncovers a disturbing connection between Matthew's birth and a similar case from 20 years ago. The birth of a child named Sophia Grant, who died during delivery under Dr. Roberts' care, has always been shrouded in secrecy. Maria finds records that have been tampered with, and she begins to piece together a terrifying truth. Dr. Roberts had made a fatal mistake during Sophia Grant's delivery. The baby had been born with asphyxia, and Dr. Roberts had inadvertently caused its death in a moment of panic. Fearing the consequences, the hospital had covered up the death, and Dr. Roberts had lived with the guilt ever since. Now, it seems that Matthew, the child born to Eleanor, is somehow connected to this past mistake. It's as if the soul of the child who died 20 years ago has returned for justice. When Maria confronts Dr. Roberts with her findings, he breaks down and admits the truth. He reveals that Sophia's child did not die from complications, but that he had made a mistake that led to the baby's death. Fearing the damage to his reputation, Dr. Roberts and the hospital had covered up the truth. Now, Matthew, born on the same date as the child he killed, has returned to haunt him. As Dr. Roberts confesses his wrongdoing, the weight of his guilt becomes too much for him to bear. He admits to having smothered the child all those years ago and is consumed by remorse. At that moment, Matthew, still lying in his crib, smiles a smile that is anything but innocent. His smile carries the weight of an unsettling knowledge, and the room is filled with a sense of finality. Eleanor, Matthew's mother, witnesses the horror unfold before her eyes. She is devastated by the revelation that Dr. Roberts had been responsible for the death of an innocent child. Yet, as the truth is finally exposed, there is a moment of unexpected peace. Matthew lifts his tiny hand, and a sense of warmth fills the room. In a soft voice, Matthew speaks the words, "I forgive you." The room falls silent as Michael Roberts collapses, overwhelmed by the weight of his sins. The nightmare that has haunted him for 20 years is finally coming to an end. But is it redemption or just the beginning of his punishment? The answer remains unclear. This chilling story serves as a reminder of the consequences of our actions and the power of guilt, redemption, and truth. Dr. Michael Roberts, once a proud and successful doctor, is now a broken man. His guilt and the haunting presence of the child he wronged have consumed him. But in the end, he has faced the truth. He has confessed his sins, and through the act of atonement, he finds a glimmer of peace. For Eleanor and Matthew, the future holds a chance at healing and a new beginning. Eleanor's journey is one of forgiveness, and Matthew, freed from the darkness that once surrounded him, grows up to live a normal, happy life. As for Michael, he begins his own path toward redemption, using his knowledge to help others, even in the confines of prison. The truth, painful as it may be, has been revealed, and in the end, it is the truth that sets everyone free. This story speaks to the profound impact that guilt and redemption can have on our lives. It reminds us that our past mistakes cannot be erased, but they can be confronted. And in confronting them, we allow ourselves and others to heal. In a high-end private hospital in New York, Dr. Michael Roberts is at the center of a difficult and emotional delivery. The atmosphere in the operating room is thick with tension as the beeping of the heart rate monitor steadily grows louder, signaling an emergency. Dr. Roberts, his face drenched in sweat, watches anxiously over the laboring mother, Eleanor Foster. She is pale and exhausted, unable to find the strength to push further. With each passing second, the baby's heart rate drops, indicating that time is running out. The midwife, Beatrice Lewis, tries to calm Eleanor with soft, encouraging words. "Breathe deeply, Eleanor. Just one more push," Beatrice urges, but Eleanor, her voice breaking from exhaustion, can only shake her head. "I can't," she whispers. "I don't have the strength left. The situation is critical." The baby's heart rate continues to plummet. Dr. Roberts glances at the monitor, a worried frown on his face. He quickly turns to his colleague, Andrew Harris, and orders, "Prepare the forceps." "We don't have time." In an eerie twist, a cold draft sweeps through the room, sending a shiver down Beatrice's spine. Despite the hospital's well-maintained air conditioning, the temperature drops suddenly, adding to the tense atmosphere. Eleanor, struggling to push, screams in agony as Dr. Roberts uses the forceps to assist in the delivery. Finally, the baby is delivered, but something is wrong. There is no cry, no sound to signify the baby is alive. The room falls into a chilling silence. Beatrice stares at the baby's small body, still covered in blood and amniotic fluid. The nurses freeze, unsure of what to do. The minutes stretch on like hours, the silence unbearable. Finally, the baby's eyes open, but they are not the innocent eyes of a newborn. They are deep, sharp, and unsettling, almost as if they hold the soul of an adult. Then, the unimaginable happens. The baby speaks, its voice deep and grave, far too mature for an infant. "You killed me once," it says. "This time, you won't escape." The room erupts into chaos. Claire Bennett, a young nurse, shrieks in terror and drops the tray of surgical instruments she was holding. Dr. Roberts stands frozen, his body drenched in cold sweat, still holding the baby in his hands, trembling in disbelief. His mind races as he wonders if he misheard the baby. But no, the baby continues to stare at him, a knowing smirk playing at the corners of its lips. Eleanor, still weak from childbirth, struggles to open her eyes and asks in a faint voice, "What's happening? Is my baby okay?" But no one answers. The silence hangs heavy in the air. Beatrice cautiously takes the baby from Dr. Roberts' trembling hands and wraps it in a cloth, placing it gently in the crib. The room holds its breath. The baby remains still, its eyes wide open, watching everyone as if it understands everything happening around it. Every newborn lets out a cry to signal life, yet this baby does not. It simply lies there, observing, as if it's been here before. Outside the delivery room, whispers begin to spread. The nurses who have been waiting for news of the delivery exchange nervous glances. "Did you see its eyes?" One nurse asks in a hushed voice. "It didn't cry." Another murmurs, fear creeping into her voice. The rumors grow, and soon the entire hospital is filled with an unsettling sense of dread. Dr. Roberts and his team are left to deal with a mystery that defies all logic. The baby, Matthew, continues to remain eerily still, watching them with those unsettling eyes, never crying, never moving, as if it were no ordinary newborn. Days pass, and the strange occurrences continue. Matthew's behavior only deepens the mystery. Nurses report feeling inexplicably cold whenever they enter the neonatal unit where Matthew is being monitored. One nurse, Isabel Martin, claims that while she was checking on Matthew, she heard a voice, a raspy whisper in her ear. Terrified, she confides in Beatrice, but Beatrice dismisses it, trying to rationalize the situation. However, as more strange occurrences unfold, even the most logical staff members begin to question what is happening. One evening, Ray Sanders, another nurse, reports seeing the shadow of a small child running down the hallway leading to the neonatal unit. He chases after the figure, but when he reaches the corner, there is no one there. His heart races, and he can't shake the feeling that something unnatural is happening. The rumors about Matthew grow, and the once professional staff at New York General Hospital begin to crack under the weight of their fear. Dr. Roberts is no exception. He begins to suffer from insomnia, plagued by nightmares of Matthew's gaze. Every time he closes his eyes, he is haunted by the memory of that baby's eyes, filled with a depth and intelligence no newborn should possess. Dr. Roberts starts to believe that the child is somehow connected to his past, a past that he has tried to bury for years. He begins to relive the traumatic events of 20 years ago, when he was responsible for the death of a newborn during another delivery. Michael Roberts had been the attending physician at the birth of Sophia Grant's child. The baby was born with asphyxia, and in a moment of carelessness, Dr. Roberts made a mistake that led to its death. Fearing the consequences, the hospital had covered up the death, and the records were falsified. As Dr. Roberts struggles with his guilt, the memories of his past come flooding back. He begins to suspect that Matthew is somehow the reincarnation of that long-dead child, returning to seek justice for the wrongs Dr. Roberts had committed. Maria Owens, a nurse at the hospital, becomes suspicious of the strange occurrences surrounding Matthew and begins investigating. She discovers that the date of Matthew's birth, March 14th, coincides exactly with the date of the stillbirth 20 years ago. A chilling realization dawns on her. There may be a connection between the two children. Maria uncovers more disturbing evidence as she digs deeper into the medical records from 20 years ago. The signature on the record of the stillbirth appears to have been altered, suggesting that Dr. Roberts may have been involved in covering up the child's death. She confronts Dr. Roberts with her findings, and after much resistance, he admits to his mistake. He confesses that he had caused the baby's death out of fear and that the child's spirit has been haunting him ever since. The revelation sends shockwaves through the hospital. Matthew, the child born to Eleanor, is revealed to be the reincarnation of the baby Dr. Roberts killed all those years ago. The truth, which had been buried for 2 decades, is finally exposed. Dr. Roberts, now a broken man, confesses to his guilt and the consequences of his actions. But the truth does not come without its own cost. As he admits his wrongdoings, Matthew's eerie silence continues. He stares at Dr. Roberts with those unblinking eyes, a reminder that the past can never truly be escaped. The chilling events that unfold in New York General Hospital leave an indelible mark on everyone involved. Dr. Roberts, despite his guilt and attempts at redemption, is ultimately consumed by his past actions. Matthew, once a child of darkness, is finally free to live a life of peace and normalcy, surrounded by love. Eleanor, who has witnessed the horrors of the past, finds solace in knowing that her son is no longer haunted by the malevolent force that once consumed him. The final act of the story reveals the devastating consequences of Dr. Roberts' actions. His confession brings the truth to light, but it is not without its own costs. He loses his career, his reputation, and ultimately his freedom, facing the legal and moral repercussions of his past mistakes. He seeks redemption by helping others and by sharing his story, hoping that future doctors will learn from his mistakes. Eleanor, too, finds peace in the aftermath of the truth. She starts a new life with Matthew, leaving New York behind to build a quiet life in a small town in California. She dedicates herself to helping other mothers, finding purpose in the care she provides to others. The story ends with a sense of closure, as the sins of the past are finally laid to rest, and the future is left to be shaped by those who have learned from the past. This haunting story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of honesty, redemption, and the consequences of our actions. The guilt of Dr. Roberts follows him for years, but through his confession and efforts to make amends, he finds a sense of peace, even if it comes too late. For Eleanor and Matthew, the truth allows them to heal and move forward with their lives. The story underscores the idea that our pasts may shape us, but it is our actions and willingness to confront our mistakes that define our futures. In the sterile and bright operating room of New York General Hospital, Dr. Michael Roberts stood, sweat beading on his forehead as he focused intently on the laboring woman in front of him. Eleanor Foster, young and fragile, lay on the delivery table, her body exhausted from hours of labor. Her face was pale, her breaths rapid, and her hands gripped the edges of the bed as if trying to hold onto the last remnants of strength. The faint beeping of the heart rate monitor echoed in the background, a constant reminder that time was running out. Eleanor's baby was in distress. Beside her, the midwife, Beatrice Lewis, tried to keep her calm, gently patting her shoulder and whispering words of encouragement. "Breathe deeply, Eleanor. Just a little longer. You can do this," she said softly. But Eleanor's body had already given up. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I can't. I have no strength left." Dr. Roberts, growing increasingly concerned, glanced quickly at the monitor. The baby's heart rate was dropping steadily. He exchanged a brief, tense look with his colleague, Andrew Harris, before issuing a sharp command. "Prepare the forceps. We don't have any more time." The urgency in his voice was undeniable. Just as he gave the order, an inexplicable chill swept through the room. It was strange because the doors to the delivery room were always sealed shut, and the air conditioning kept a constant temperature. Yet the sudden coldness made Beatrice shiver. It was as if something unnatural had entered the room. But there was no time to question it. Eleanor screamed in agony as Dr. Roberts maneuvered the forceps to help deliver the baby. Time seemed to stretch, slowing to a crawl as the baby was finally brought into the world. But there was something terribly wrong. Silence. No cry. No sound at all. The room froze in place. The nurses, who had been preparing for the usual post-delivery chaos, stood motionless. The baby, still covered in blood and amniotic fluid, lay in Dr. Roberts' hands. Beatrice's face drained of color as she stared at the tiny, lifeless form, and the once constant beeping of the heart rate monitor seemed to stop. No one moved. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, suddenly, the baby's eyes opened to eyes that were not the innocent, unfocused gaze of a newborn. They were sharp, piercing, and unnaturally deep, as though they held the soul of an adult. Dr. Roberts' heart skipped a beat as the baby locked eyes with him. In a voice that was far too deep for such a small body, The child spoke, sending a chill through the entire room. "You kill me once. This time, you won't escape." A blood-curdling scream echoed from Claire Bennett, a young nurse who had been working for less than a year. She dropped a tray of surgical instruments, the sound of metal clattering against the floor making the room feel even more suffocating. Dr. Roberts froze, the baby still in his trembling hands, his body drenched in cold sweat. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. "No," he muttered under his breath. "Impossible." But the baby continued to stare at him, its lips curling into a smirk that mocked his horror. Eleanor, still dazed from the trauma of childbirth, weakly opened her eyes and asked, "What's happening? Is my baby okay?" No one answered. Beatrice, still in shock, gingerly took the baby from Dr. Roberts' arms, wrapping it in a cloth before placing it gently in the crib. The room was heavy with tension. The baby, still not crying, lay motionless. Its eyes remained wide open, watching everyone, as if it understood the gravity of the situation. It was not like any newborn they had ever seen. It simply stared, unblinking. Outside the operating room, whispers began to circulate among the staff. "Did you see its eyes?" one nurse asked. "It didn't cry." Another murmured, a tremor of fear in their voice. The atmosphere in the hospital grew increasingly tense. The strange silence surrounding the baby began to weigh on everyone, and soon, fear crept into every corner of the hospital. Nurses spoke in hushed voices, gossiping about the unnatural occurrence they had just witnessed. Dr. Roberts, still in shock, tried to regain his composure, but the strange events didn't end with the birth. Matthew, the baby, refused to cry, and no matter how long he lay in his crib, he remained still, unblinking. Other nurses reported feeling unnaturally cold whenever they entered the neonatal unit, and some even heard strange whispers, voices that they couldn't explain. One nurse, Isabel Martin, claimed to hear a voice right beside her ear while she was checking on Matthew. It was deep and raspy, unlike anything a newborn should produce. It was as if the child was communicating with something beyond the physical realm. One night, Ray Sanders, another nurse, swore he saw a shadow of a small child running down the hallway leading to the neonatal unit. When he tried to chase it, the shadow disappeared, leaving him with an unsettling feeling that something was terribly wrong. As the strange occurrences continued, Dr. Roberts began to unravel. He had always been a composed and confident doctor, but the birth of Matthew had shattered his calm. He was haunted by the memory of the baby's stare. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those deep, knowing eyes staring back at him. His sleep became plagued with nightmares, and during the day, he could feel the weight of Matthew's gaze following him. Dr. Roberts was no longer the man he once was. It was then that Maria Owens, a nurse who had been with the hospital for several years, began to put the pieces together. She had heard the rumors about Matthew's strange behavior and the unexplained occurrences that followed his birth. As she dug deeper into the records, she made a chilling discovery. Matthew's birth date, March 14th, coincided exactly with the date of another child's death, one that Dr. Roberts had been involved with 20 years prior. A child that had died under mysterious circumstances. The more Maria investigated, the more the pieces fell into place. The medical records from 20 years ago were suspiciously flawless, showing no signs of correction or revision. She found a slight irregularity in the signature section, a smudge in Dr. Roberts' signature that suggested the documents had been altered. Further research revealed that Michael Roberts had been the attending physician for a stillbirth involving a woman named Sophia Grant, and that baby had died under suspicious circumstances, likely the result of an error during delivery, one that Dr. Roberts had tried to cover up. Maria confronted Dr. Roberts with her findings, but at first he denied everything. But as she pressed him, his composure began to crack. He eventually admitted to his past mistake. The child from 20 years ago had died because of a mistake Dr. Roberts had made during the delivery. In his fear of losing his career, Dr. Roberts and the hospital administration had covered up the truth, and now it seemed that Matthew, the child born on the anniversary of that death, was the vengeful spirit of that lost infant, returned to seek justice. The terrifying events that followed Matthew's birth were all connected to the guilt and cover-up from Dr. Roberts' past. Matthew, it seemed, was a living reminder of the doctor's sins, and his eerie behavior was a manifestation of the unresolved guilt that haunted Dr. Roberts. But even with the truth exposed, the terror didn't stop. Matthew's presence continued to loom over the hospital, and as the days went by, the staff felt increasingly uneasy. The story unfolds as Dr. Roberts must face his past and the consequences of his actions. He must grapple with the consequences of his cover-up and come to terms with the life he has taken. The events surrounding Matthew's birth serve as a painful reminder of the importance of integrity and accountability in medicine, and of how one man's mistake can ripple through time, affecting everyone around him. In the end, Dr. Roberts admits to his wrongdoings, confessing publicly to the cover-up that had haunted him for years. His confession sends shockwaves through the hospital, and the public, once revering him as a skilled and trusted doctor, now sees him as a man who failed to take responsibility for his actions. The guilt and regret that Dr. Roberts had carried for years became his greatest torment, and ultimately, he is forced to face the consequences of his mistakes. The haunting presence of Matthew and the truth of his past bring Michael Roberts to his knees. This tragic tale illustrates the unshakable weight of guilt and the powerful impact of our choices. The journey to redemption is never easy, and in this case, it comes too late to save Michael's reputation or his peace of mind. However, the final lesson is clear. No matter how much we try to bury our mistakes, they always resurface, and we must confront them before they consume us. The haunting of Matthew Foster is a metaphor for the past we cannot escape, one that follows us until we face the truth. In the tense and cold operating room of New York General Hospital, Dr. Michael Roberts, a respected and composed physician, stood in front of the delivery table, sweat running down his face. The sterile environment, usually calm and controlled, now felt suffocating. The beeping of the heart rate monitor echoed through the room, mirroring the growing sense of urgency. Eleanor Foster, the young woman giving birth, lay on the table in immense pain. Her breath came in rapid bursts, and her hands clutched the edges of the bed, trying to hold on to whatever strength remained. It had been hours of labor, and the situation was quickly becoming more critical. Eleanor's baby was in distress, and Dr. Roberts knew time was running out. He exchanged tense glances with his colleague, Andrew Harris, before barking orders. "Prepare the forceps. We need to act now." The urgency in his voice was clear as the baby's heart rate dropped even further. As the pressure in the room mounted, a strange and inexplicable cold draft swept through the sterile air, sending a chill through the staff. Beatrice Lewis, the midwife, attempted to reassure Eleanor, her voice soft but firm. "Breathe, Eleanor. You can do this. Just a little more." But Eleanor, exhausted and in pain, could only shake her head weakly, her voice breaking. "I can't. I don't have the strength anymore." Dr. Roberts' gaze flicked to the monitor again, and his stomach sank. The baby's heartbeat was slowing, too weak for comfort. He needed to act fast, and with that thought, he maneuvered the forceps with precision, desperate to bring the baby into the world. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the baby was born. But something was horribly wrong. There was no cry. An eerie silence filled the room as Dr. Roberts held the baby in his hands, still covered in blood and amniotic fluid. The usual chaos of the delivery room, screams of joy and relief from parents. The cries of the newborn was absent. The baby's body lay motionless, unresponsive. The nurses froze in place, unsure of what they were witnessing. Beatrice, her face ashen, stared in shock, unable to comprehend what was happening. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours, and then the baby's eyes opened. But they weren't the eyes of a typical newborn. They were sharp, unnaturally deep, and seemed to hold the wisdom of an adult. Dr. Roberts' heart skipped a beat as the baby locked eyes with him. The gaze was penetrating, as though it could see into his very soul. Then, in a deep and gravely voice, the baby spoke. "You kill me once. This time, you won't escape." The words sent a chill down everyone's spine. Claire Bennett, a young nurse who had only recently started working at the hospital, screamed in terror and dropped a tray of surgical instruments, the clattering metal echoing in the now-still room. The shock was palpable, and Dr. Roberts, frozen in fear, felt his breath catch. The words echoed in his mind, and a cold sweat drenched his body. "No," he muttered, his voice trembling. "Impossible." But the baby, its tiny lips twisting into a knowing smirk, continued to stare at him with those piercing eyes. The room was so silent, you could hear a pin drop. Eleanor, still dazed from the trauma of childbirth, weakly opened her eyes and asked, "What's happening? Is my baby okay?" But no one answered her question. Beatrice, her voice barely a whisper, slowly stepped forward, her hands shaking as she took the baby from Dr. Roberts' arms. "Maybe we misheard," she murmured, trying to reassure herself more than anyone else. But the dread in the air was undeniable. The baby, still silent, was placed in the newborn crib, but the feeling of unease did not dissipate. It lay there, eyes wide open, as if it understood everything around it. Outside the operating room, whispers began to spread among the hospital staff. "Did you see its eyes? It didn't cry. It just stared." The eerie atmosphere began to spread throughout the hospital. Nurses and doctors alike were haunted by the unnatural silence of the baby, the unsettling feeling that something was deeply wrong. The rumors grew louder with each passing day, and soon, even the most level-headed professionals began to doubt their own senses. Matthew, Eleanor's son, lay in the neonatal care unit, his stillness unnerving everyone who entered the room. Nurses reported an inexplicable chill every time they entered his room. One young nurse, Isabel Martin, heard a whisper while checking on him, a voice that wasn't human. Others saw shadows flickering at the edge of their vision, and some even swore that they had seen a small figure running down the hospital hallways late at night. Dr. Roberts, once confident and steadfast, began to unravel. The haunting presence of Matthew was impossible to escape. Every time he closed his eyes, the piercing gaze of the newborn followed him. Nightmares plagued him, and during the day, he saw Matthew's eyes staring at him from mirrors and reflections. The tension in his life became unbearable. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. The guilt of that day, and the words the baby had spoken to him, plagued his every waking moment. Maria Owens, a nurse at the hospital, was among the first to notice the growing unrest. She had always been skeptical of the supernatural, but the strange occurrences surrounding Matthew were too much to ignore. One day, she discovered a disturbing coincidence. Matthew's birth date matched the exact date of another death at the hospital, one that Dr. Roberts had been involved with 20 years earlier. After some digging, Maria uncovered an old medical file for a patient named Sophia Grant, who had died during childbirth 2 decades ago. The file had been tampered with, and Dr. Roberts had signed off on it. The cause of death had been listed as natural complications, but Maria suspected that something darker had occurred. Could the strange events surrounding Matthew be connected to this long-buried mistake? Determined to uncover the truth, Maria confronted Dr. Roberts, who initially denied any connection between the two events. But as the investigation deepened, Dr. Roberts' facade began to crack. He admitted that 20 years ago, he had made a mistake during a delivery, and the child had died as a result. In his panic to avoid the consequences, he and the hospital had covered up the death. But now, it seemed, that mistake was coming back to haunt him through Matthew. The atmosphere in the hospital became more oppressive by the day. The strange occurrences surrounding Matthew intensified, and the whispers grew louder. Nurses refused to work night shifts, and the medical staff became increasingly paranoid. Even Dr. Roberts, once a respected and confident physician, began to lose control. He suffered from insomnia, nightmares, and disturbing visions of Matthew. He had become a shell of the man he once was. Finally, Maria uncovered the full truth. Matthew's birth date was not a coincidence. He was the spirit of the child who had died 20 years ago, seeking revenge on the doctor who had caused its death. Dr. Roberts' guilt had manifested in the form of this newborn, and it was only a matter of time before he would be forced to face the consequences of his actions. The moment of reckoning came when Dr. Roberts confessed to the crime he had hidden for 2 decades. He revealed that, during the delivery all those years ago, he had made a careless mistake, and the child had died as a result. He had been too afraid to admit his error, so he and the hospital had covered it up. But Matthew, the child who had been wronged, was now seeking justice. The haunting of Matthew Foster and the terrifying events that followed his birth were the result of Dr. Roberts' past sins. The child's presence in the hospital was a reminder of the weight of guilt and the consequences of not taking responsibility for one's actions. Dr. Roberts had lived for years running from his mistakes, but in the end, he had to face the truth. The truth was painful, but it was necessary for redemption. Matthew, despite being a symbol of vengeance, was also a symbol of justice, one that could not be ignored or avoided. And as the truth came to light, Dr. Roberts' punishment began. But the true resolution came when Matthew, the innocent child, was finally at peace. This story serves as a reminder of the power of guilt, the weight of our actions, and the inevitability of facing the consequences. No matter how deeply we bury our mistakes, they will always find a way to surface, demanding to be acknowledged and confronted. This story teaches the profound lesson that our actions, especially the mistakes we make, will always find a way to resurface. Whether intentional or accidental, wrongdoings carry consequences that cannot be ignored forever. For those of us who have lived many years, it's important to remember that the burden of guilt can weigh heavily, but acknowledging and taking responsibility for our past actions is the only path to true peace and healing. The tale of Dr. Michael Roberts reminds us that avoiding the truth may seem like the easier route, but it ultimately leads to personal suffering. Facing the truth, though difficult, allows for growth, redemption, and a chance for forgiveness. As we age, it's crucial to reflect on the lessons of our past and make amends where possible. This story encourages us to be honest with ourselves and with others, knowing that the courage to face our mistakes can ultimately bring peace, not only to our hearts but to those around us as well. It's never too late to find redemption and restore the balance of our lives. Thank you for watching this powerful story of redemption. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Stories TH for more heart-touching stories. Your support helps us bring more inspiring content to you every week. See you in the next video.